Hi, this is Craig Wesco recording for s2p.org, and today we're going to be talking about Cain and Abel. So this is from Genesis 4, and basically the story is Cain is a tiller of the ground, and Abel is a keeper of sheep, basically takes care of animals. And these are the two jobs that God gave humanity. He says to be caretakers of the animals, to have dominion over them, and also to be tillers of the ground and growers of food. So we're feeding ourselves with this fruit and this vegetation, and we're also feeding the animals that we're taking care of. So that's the context of this. And now it says, starting in verse 1 of chapter 4 of Genesis, "Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground." So again, those two jobs that God gave humanity, to be keepers of the animals and tillers of the ground, growers of food. And so each of these two sons has one of those particular jobs that God gave us. Then it continues in verse 3. "And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to God." So just brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. So just some fruit from the ground. "But Abel also brought of the firstling of the fat of the flock. And Yahweh respected Abel in his offering, but he did not respect Cain in his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it." And then the rest of the story, Cain gets angry, continues to be angry, and kills his brother Abel, sort of out of jealousy, I guess. And then all kinds of things snowball from there, basically a lot of bad things. So the point here, and this is something that's often overlooked, even by Bible scholars and translators, where it says in verse 4, "Abel also brought of the firstling of the fat of the flock." So this is a difficult passage for a lot of people to translate. It's the only time that this compound phrase is used in Scripture. Now, in order to understand why God accepted Abel's offering but not Cain's, it's very important to understand what that phrase means. So to provide some insight, let's look at Hebrews 11:4. So in Hebrews 11:4, it says that Abel's offering was accepted because it was offered from faith. So now, what does that mean? Well, we're supposed to live by faith, to put our trust in God, and not follow our own will, but follow God's will, knowing that following God's will is what's best. And by living by faith, we are offering God our best. And so if we understand this passage in verse 3 and 4, where it says, "In the process of time, Cain brought an offering of fruit of the ground to God, but Abel brought the firstling of the fat of the flock." So the difference here is that Cain just brought some of the fruit of the ground. He's like, okay, I'm a tiller of the ground. The things that I produce are this fruit and this vegetation. That's my job. And so when he's giving this gift to God, he just brings some of it, not his best. It doesn't say the first fruit of the fat of the land. It just says some of the fruit. Whereas Abel, it's the firstling of the fat of the flock. So Abel offered his very best to God. He was like, this is my best, God. This is what I have to offer. And God was pleased by it because he offered his best to God. Whereas Cain, it says, it doesn't say that he offered his best. And so then God has this talk with Cain, and he's like, why are you angry? You should rule over this sin that wants to rule over you. And so then, of course, Jesus shows us how to overcome all sin later on. But basically the idea here, and this is a very important part, how can we get just from this text in Genesis that Abel offered it from faith, but Cain did not. And that's why it's very important to understand that of the firstling of the fat of the flock, that phrase signifies that it's his very best that he offers. So we should offer our very best to God, and it doesn't say anything here about the animal being killed. In fact, some translators don't understand what that phrase means, the firstling of the fat of the flock. So they think, oh well, it was an offering, it was a gift, so it must have been an animal sacrifice. So he killed this sheep, and then the fat of the flock meant he must have come with this dismembered sheep carcass, and then he came back with all the fat that he cut off of the dismembered carcass, and he's like an armful of fat, and it's just like, no, that's not what it's saying here. In fact, altars don't even come about until Genesis 8, and animal sacrifices. So for somebody to interpret that as in Genesis 4, as that's what's happening, well, you're sort of interpreting something that happened before that by something that happened later. So that's one of the mistakes that people often make when trying to understand this passage. But the key distinction here is that he offered his very best to God, and that's what his brother Cain did not do. So that's what we should also do, is offer our very best to God. This is Craig Wesco for S2P.org.